2:30 now, so we'll get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here, listening to us. So today's session is all about pharmacy technician and pharmacy service assistant endpoint assessments. There has been a lot of changes, so I think it was important for us to touch base with you and tell you all about all the changes and what needs to happen and what changes we have brought in line with IFAT. Next slide, please, Andy. So in today's session, we'll be covering about approaches to the new pharmacy technician dispensation at this moment in time, because the new endpoint assessment plan is not published yet. So this is what we had published as EPA and/or dispensation. So it's about EPA, but it's mainly about not the new plan, but only about the dispensation at this time. So the action timeline and the process that you need to follow for the pharmacy technician EPA during this dispensation time, and what is allowed and not allowed under this new plan and under dispensation. And then also about the pharmacy service assistant as well. There has been a new dispensation that has been put in, and also some important elements about preparing the employers.
Why is it important that we follow SOPs?
Sorry, somebody asked a question, so we'll give you time to ask the questions at the end. So we'll come back to those. Thank you. We'll cover those. So you can put your questions in the chat if you don't mind, and then we'll pick them up from there. So thank you. And also good practices for preparing your learners for the Pharmacy Service Assistant EPA. Some tips. Next slide, please, Andy. So we'll first start with the pharmacy technician. So pharmacy technician, this is the statement from the IFAT website that a new temporary dispensation has been applied. Originally, what we communicated with you was that this dispensation was only between February and April. The statement has changed now, and they've said until the new revised assessment plan is published. So it started in February, but it's going to carry on until it's no longer necessary. So the new plan that's there, the revised plan, is already there. So we have been told to apply that new assessment plan as part of the dispensation. And that's the key change, that fully integrated EPA plan. So what that fully integrated EPA plan means for you, I think it's on the next slide, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I think the key, is that the Unit 22 and 23, if you're looking at the EPA specification, is no longer required. That means the two EPA components under the integrated EPA plan is that observation and professional discussion does not need to occur. However, there is still that requirement of all the other things need to be completed as part of the gateway. So learners still need to demonstrate that they have met the knowledge, skills, and behaviors, apprentice and completed a GPHC recognized pharmacy technician qualification or a program. So if you've registered your learners on the integrated apprenticeship qualification, that is already GPHC approved. So that's the qualification. So at this minute in time, you only need to complete unit 1 to 21 of that qualification, not the 22, 23, as I said before. You need to make sure that you've received the notification of results after those units have been completed and sampled by your SV. And also making sure that the gateway requirement of the functional skills is met, and also a complete portfolio signed by the workplace, that is the employer, and the training provider, supervisor or assessor. So that portfolio needs to be submitted. We'll talk about that portfolio in a bit more details. So in terms of the action timeline that is there, it's clearly telling you what happened. So on program, the apprentice, I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but you can see we'll share this slide deck, is that the learner on program completes that unit 1 to 21, as we said, and that is done in 1 to 24 months, the gateway can only be applied during that 24 months, not before, because GPHC requirement is that the learner must complete the full 24 months on program. So we cannot apply the gateway any before, and we cannot claim the results until that 24 months is complete. So those are the two key things that need to bear in mind. So in line with that, you need to make sure that the dates in ACE 360 of the learner's start date and completion date is accurate, because if that is not accurate and you think learners in 24th month, but we think learners still in 23rd month, according to our dates on the ACE 360, we will not allow you to submit the gateway requirements and we will not accept it. So those dates is the key thing that I want to highlight here, that you must make sure that they're absolutely accurate. The portfolio of evidence that must include the evidence that maps to all the KSBs. Originally, it was just for professional discussion KSBs, but now it needs to happen. So that portfolio that is gathered during the on program, the mapping needs to be done to all the KSBs. We are providing you that mapping. We'll come to that. So that mapping has to happen to all the KSBs. And also that the other change is that internal quality assurance has to happen of that portfolio. So that can happen at the end, just before the gateway, when everything is complete, to make sure. So the employer needs to carry out that internal quality assurance, or the provider, to make sure that it maps to that KSBs. Then the standards verifier, when the apprentices work for the level 3 has been done, and that, you know, the standard verification needs to take place. So that notification of results for that unit 1 to 21 or the on-program element has taken place, and you submit that notification of results alongside as part of the gateway. So that has to happen for every single learner who's doing the apprenticeship pathway. So every single learner needs to be sampled. And that evidence of each unit needs to be clearly referenced. So I've already talked about the SV sampling. Again, that would happen also in that 24th month as well of the on-program element. Then come to gateway. So gateway, again, apprentice is signed off by the employer when the learner is ready and everything else has happened on program bit. So then gateway requirements need to be checked, and everything needs to be submitted, as I said before. So apprentice needs to clearly demonstrate all the knowledge, skills and behavior. So portfolio mapping is important. English and maths is important, that you submit the evidence for that, and notification of results, as I said before, after the sampling has taken place. And also the employer gateway declaration form needs to be completed, and that declaration form consists of, I'm going to come to that next, certain things that you need to make sure you've ticked off and it's completed all of those. So this action timeline is actually telling you what needs to happen when, and this is available on the ACE 360, but I wanted to show you here so that you're clear on what needs to happen when. Right, next slide, please. So gateway declaration is exactly what was on the action timeline. All of these things is a checklist for you. But the important thing is that employer declaration confirming that the learner has achieved all knowledge, skills and behaviors, and the learner's own declaration, which is confirming the gateway evidence, is their own. So it's authentication as well here, and they've independently completed all the evidence within the portfolio. So those are the two elements alongside all the other things. Okay. Right, so evidence mapping grid. Now there are certain important elements of here in the evidence mapping grid. So you need to complete that, as I said before, to show all the knowledge, skills and behaviors, not just for what was just for the professional discussion before. So your portfolio must demonstrate that all the KSBs listed in the occupational standards are mapped, and also it's a real work. So it must relate to that real work that has been completed by the learner, not the simulated activities. So no simulation activities are allowed. And also a written statement from the employer confirming that you have produced the, that evidence, the authentication. So this is in the gateway declaration and portfolio authentication. So that I've already talked about. So next slide, please. So evidence mapping grid, the key element that I need to point out here is that is the reflective account, because lots of people have asked us the question about that, how many number of pieces of evidence, and also whether reflective accounts can or can't be used. So before there was like 10 pieces of evidence in different sections. So we've now laid out our portfolio, our evidence mapping grid, in certain sections that you can actually see on the portfolio mapping. So you must include in the evidence mapping grid the portfolio, each evidence number, sorry, get my right teeth in, right statement out. So evidence numbers and names need to be clearly identified against each KSB or each section of that, where we have combined some of the knowledge, skills and behaviors in the evidence mapping grid. So you need to make sure that that's clearly referenced. So whether you're doing it on your one file or whichever, but that portfolio labeling is really important so that our IEAs can actually identify them clearly as well. So reflective accounts can only be used in certain conditions, in certain duties or knowledge, skills and behaviors, because it's only where the reflection is mentioned as a knowledge or a skill. Other than that, reflective accounts are the same as before. They can't be used as evidence. So duty I've already listed here, and they're already in the portfolio mapping grid. When you look at it on the ACE360, it's clearly listed that you can't use it other than any of these areas. Okay. So I've just brought a section of the evidence mapping grid here just to show you. So it clearly identifies what duty, what evidence requirements, and the type of work-based evidence which can be used or can't be used. Those work-based types of evidence are just, it's not an exhaustive list, it's just some ideas. If you've used anything else, that's absolutely fine, but evidence name and number identified at the end. So this is the set for the section of person-centered care, and you can see that you can clearly, it's also important for preparing the learner I mean, not for this particular one because there is no any professional discussion or anything, but for pharmacy service assistant, when we come to it, it's important that learner knows which evidence goes against which knowledge, skills and behaviors. So we'll come to that, and so that when they're answering questions in professional discussion, it's helpful. But for here, because we have to validate as EPAO that learner has met every single knowledge, skill and behavior. So, and also for the person who's going to be internally quality assuring this evidence mapping grid, it'll be important for them as well to see the evidence name and number and against each of those sections, so that they can quality assure to say, yes, I'm confident that they have met all of those KSBs. Okay, next one. So this is talking, what we've talked about up until now was about what's going to happen during the dispensation. But we know when the dispensation is finished, our approach is going to be that we will only keep one qualification. We will not keep both qualifications running. So we will be withdrawing the integrated apprenticeship qualification, so that because there's no requirement of that unit 22 and 23, we will continue the standalone qualification. I've listed both qualification numbers here. So you don't need to do anything, but all the learners who are currently registered on integrated apprenticeship qualification, we will transfer them onto that 603-51603 qualification, which is the standalone, which is not integrated. But the process for them to complete all those units, because those unit 1 to 21 are exactly the same, will be the same. But there will be a different internal code. So you need to absolutely make sure when in future, if you're registering new learners, you're registering them, if they're doing through apprenticeship, on the internal code which says apprenticeship and not the other one, simply because, as you know, that sampling for apprenticeships has to happen as 100% for us to validate that they have achieved everything. So it's really important for you to, once we have removed the integrated apprenticeship qualification, you need to be mindful of that when you're registering learners, whether they're doing through apprenticeship funding or non-apprenticeship route. And also, so I think that was a key message that I wanted to kind of make sure that you're aware of. And obviously we will communicate nearer the time when we are ready to withdraw all of this message again, but it's important to take note of that. Okay. So just some of the good practice things to prepare for the gateway when you're submitting all the things for pharmacy technician. is ensuring that the learners, you know, that involved in the mapping of the portfolio evidence for the KSBs, it's still because they've done their qualification, they know what's where, and it's, if they start doing right from the beginning, they get the hang of it. So it's not at the end. So throughout the on program, they can start doing that mapping. And again, ensure that you have used the Pearson approved documentation, the gateway declaration form, authentication form, and mapping grid. So our approved documentation that's on ACE 360 that you can access once you've registered your learners, and I'm pretty sure you all who are here today have got those. Use those documentation. And again, ensure that gateway paperwork is completed with dates and signatures where required. And only the acceptable forms of maths and English results are uploaded on the gateway, and the apprentice and employer contacts are accurate and up to date in ACE 360 as well. And as I said before, the gateway evidence will not be accepted prior to month 24. We can only accept it during that month. And ensure that the portfolio is quality assured by the employer or provider to make sure that all the KSBs are achieved and mapped. So that was all for the pharmacy technician. Has there been any questions before I move on to the next bit, Andy?
Yeah, we've got 4.
Okay. Right. Can the reflective accounts be used for skills if it's not being used for the EPA? You mean for the qualification part? Is that what you meant, Claire? You can unmute yourself to speak, Claire, if you want to.
Hi, I'm more thinking about medicines reconciliation, you know, where they do the reviews with the patient. It's not difficult to, it's difficult to go in and observe them without sort of hinging on data protection and the confidentiality of the patient. I'd rather it be where it's written either by the expert witness in their own words or by the learner and validated by the witness. Is that allowed?
So yes, you can use the expert witness, but not a reflective account as a reflective account. So it's a state. Yeah.
Yeah. Has to be written by the witness. Yeah.
That's a good question. I think ideally, yes, or the assessor who's doing it. We've always said this for our qualification part, that an assessor who's overseeing the assessment can even do a chat with the expert witness and record that. It doesn't have to be written. I understand these people have got such precious times who are working in pharmacies, and I totally get that. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a written statement. It can just be a discussion with the expert witness as to what they did and how they did it, and you know, and then it's just with a validation to say that this recording was done with this person and submitted it that way. It doesn't have to be. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Now I understand that how important it is for the experts working in the field and how precious their time is. So that's fine. Okay. Right. So the next question was. Okay. Yeah. So reflective counts. That was that. So we. Okay. Do you have to put page paragraph numbers when referencing? No, it's just the evidence number. I'm Leslie, I'm not expecting as such page unless it's an absolute massive document, you know, where they've, which I'm not likely to see. But if it's like the internal quality assurance person, and I think who's going to be seeing that. So I think it's just the evidence number. No, I'm unless anybody else want to say anything who's from my team, I'm not expecting that. I'd
agree, Roman. And okay. Michelle's also mentioned how clear identification of the reference number and the type of evidence.
Yeah,
it's as you said, from an IQA perspective, it's that audit trail.
Yeah.
And similarly, from an independent endpoint assessor's perspective, when they're reviewing the evidence, does everything tie up together?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's not the good old days of where we used to do it on each page, the referencing. I remember those days. Okay, so the next question was from Claire again, was it? I'm just sorry, my screen is just flipping. Okay, so employer reference for level 2, a separate reference form, but there's no official pay. So employer reference. Okay, we'll come back to that when we're discussing level 2, Claire. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Because
that's
I'm not
fine.
sure what you mean by the employer reference.
Yeah, it's not the appendix one. It's I've been asked to provide references that they've worked there for 6 months or whatever, or over a year or whatever, and they've known them for so long. And I don't even know if that's something we need to provide, but I've been asked for it by our gateway people.
Okay. I don't know if Andy or Chris, do you know what employer reference that we're talking about?
No, it's not ringing any bells with me, unless it's an internal thing, Claire.
Yes.
Your internal staff are reviewing and confirming.
It is, because I've had one rejected, and I think it was the appendix that rejected and not that. But I've emailed you anyway about it. So.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So Sam, the answer to your question, gateway form is available on ACE 360. Chris, is that right? It's all been uploaded. So,
yes, it's all there. I've just
okay.
replied in the chat, but yeah, all the new dispensation docs that were finalised are up there now. Yeah.
Can you use the knowledge from assignments to achieve the KSBs? Yeah, I mean, if the written for the knowledge is the written work that the learner has done, then exactly that's what it's going to be. So Lisa, yes, that's what that would be. Donna, are all the forms in ACE now? So yeah, we've just confirmed. Yeah. Okay. So if we use portfolio system that identifies referencing against specification and upload file, there's this additional. Okay, if you use a portfolio system, but that portfolio system, is that mapping to the KSBs as well? Not.
Yeah, we can holistically map to all elements against whatever, if it's a witness testimony or an expert witness testimony or an observation, we can actually reference to all elements to that piece of work in the electronic portfolio.
I'm trying to think now, but how?
So in that instance, if you're using an e-portfolio, Tina,
yeah,
you just need to allow access to the independent endpoint assessor.
Right.
So
okay.
what we'll do, we'll pick up offline around that, because we do have a process that will allow you to provide the evidence required for gateway, but then also provide a signpost as to who will be setting up the independent endpoint assessor for e-portfolio access.
Okay. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question was, gateway cannot be open at 21 months for completion. No, that was for the old process before. And we, so because the learner has to complete full 24 months, according to the new integrated plan, it can only be applied at 24th month, not before that. So Lisa, that we have queried this with the IFATE as well as the QA body, and that is the answer. It can only be applied once they've completed the full 23 months. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all the questions. Has anybody got any other questions that they hadn't put it in the chat?
Do we have, you know, the IQA sampling? Does it have to, so every piece of evidence you're saying has to be sampled by the IQA? Because at the moment, with obviously with the assignments, we just do a sample of them. So no, we dip in.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So what we're asking you to not sample is the IQA, not the qualification part. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this evidence mapping grid that is on slide 10 here. So the whole, at the end of that evidence mapping grid, it says it has to be IQA'd. So yeah, that has to be done 100% again, because what you are confirming as a provider or the employer whosoever's doing the IQA is that what they did on qualification part, they have actually, as a result, met all the KSBs.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Part. Okay, no problems. Okay. If there's no further question, will this 24-month opening gateway for learners? Sorry, I'm just trying to read that question. Bear with me. Just bring it again. Completing this July, although they enrolled under, yes, unfortunately, yeah, sorry, Lisa, that is because it's the dispensation that started from February. it's for all learners, not under old rules or new rules. It's applied to everybody. Yeah. We have tried our best and fought hard for you all, but unfortunately it just did not happen. We tried. Okay, so moving on to Pharmacy Service Assistant. Okay, so Pharmacy Service Assistant, also there is a new dispensation that has been applied. And again, we only saw this on IFED like you also. We have tried to query this when it's applied from or what it is. We don't know at the moment. So we are taking it as read because it's on the IFED website. So there has been additional 15 minutes that have been applied to simulated observation. So the total time has been increased by 15 minutes, and that's the key change. Next slide, please, Andy. So just some important things that we wanted to go through with regards to the Andy, have you moved too much forward? No, that's fine. Sorry, oh, it's me. Okay, so just important things that I wanted to go through for each of the components for this Pharmacy Service Assistant. Now, just wanted to highlight the key things about multiple choice test. Multiple choice test, we have got a specific content in our EPA resource pack. Although you might be teaching the qualification, and I know it's absolutely mapped to the qualification and the EPA standards both are, but that content, what we test learners is on that content, which is in the EPA resource pack. So you need to make sure that the learner has been taught everything that is in that content in the EPA resource pack, because test questions are only related to that. People have questioned us before, oh, that's not the answer to that, looking at a SAM, for example, but that was in the test content. That is exactly what was there. And that it's not any different to what you would normally teach as well, but just wanted to kind of highlight that. And then you need to make sure that you are booking the multiple choice test via Edexcel Online, not via ACE360, because only when the apprentices are approved for EPA after they've gone through Gateway is only when you can book for the multiple choice test. The test is administered via special software platform. Now, we know that there has been some issues with this software specifically, that especially in NHS, but I know other people have also had problem in downloading this software. So that software guidance is there in ACE360. The steps that you need to follow to download and check the requirements of that test software is already there as well. If not, you need to contact our customer service team. And this needs to happen way before the learner, or when you're booking the test, or even before that, you need to download this software to make sure that you can access it and there aren't any blockers, because I know the NHS systems do block this POP software. So please, this is our plea to you, is just check that software, download it in advance, contact our customer service team, have a look at all the guidance that's there. Don't wait till the day the learner is sitting the test, because that day is too late and it's not fair on learner, because they're already with anxiety, and we don't want the learner to go through on the day with any issues with the software. And I'm sure you'll agree to that as well. So please make sure you've tested, downloaded, done everything with that test software beforehand. But if you can't download, because then you need to follow the guidance about how you can access the paper-based test, because we still offer that, because we don't want to disadvantage any learners. We need to make sure that because of the IT restrictions, there is an alternative in place for them. But then you have to make sure that there is a guide, there is invigilation in process and everything. So how to access that paper-based type of test, there is a general guidance section in knowledge base in the ACE360 titled Invigilation of Paper-Based Test. You need to make sure that you've got that in place before you are requesting the paper-based test. You've followed all of that as well, because that will be checked as well. So just some of the things that we have learned lessons with during the time we've been now delivering this, we wanted to kind of share with you, so that you don't go through all of those issues like others have. Okay, next slide, please. So simulated observations. So simulated observation and question and answer session, like I said, the extra 15 minutes have been applied. And again, this is booked via ACE360. And this can only be done after the apprentice has completed the multiple choice test, because in the assessment plan, it tells us the sequence in which the learner needs to take these components. So although the gateway would have been submitted before the multiple choice test, but the other two elements, the components, can only be booked after they've completed the multiple choice test. And both components, simulated observation and professional discussion, can be done remotely using Teams or Zoom. Any of those is fine. Simulated observation can be taken as on the same date or a different date, whichever, on as the professional discussion. And both must be completed within 3 months of the gateway approval date. So when you're submitting booking requests via AS360, please make sure you're giving 14 working days lead time, because we need to make sure we've got the IEAs allocated and they've had a planning meeting with you. They've gone through all the requirements with you, so that all of those things can happen within those 14 days. So you can't just say, oh, you're putting it now and you want it next week on a Friday, a test. So that's like, you know, it's important that we've gone through the process with you. We've had that planning meeting, because there are certain requirements that we need to go through. As a provide, you know, it's just provide us the different range of dates, that possibilities for, you know, when you're putting dates, times of the week, with anything in the addition. It's, you can fill anything in the additional notes section, actually, not just so, because it could be just, you know, that certain time of the day is better, or certain, you know, the learners does not work on certain days, or whatever you want to put it, or anything specific requirements to access, you know, the pharmacy, for example, if you wanted a face-to-face something. So anything that you want to put in there. So simulated observation, as we said, is 1 hour. It's 2 20-minute observations plus 20 minutes of Q&A that needs to take place. So there is 2 simulated observations for 20 minutes each. The important aspect is that you need to make sure that learner has got access to the grading criteria and the indicative evidence for the observation, which is in the EPA resource pack, so that they know what they need to show, what they need to demonstrate when they're being observed. You know, we know as a broad thing, it says the activities that need to be covered during the observation are dispensing and working within standard operating procedures and the legal and ethical framework. But there's specific grading criteria for the observation. So they know what they need to show when they're dispensing medication, for example, so that, and also when you are doing any mock assessments for them, tell them what they were able to show and what they were not able to show. And if they've got access to those grading criteria, they'll know themselves. The other important aspect is there is a task brief that they need to read in the first 5 minutes of that, doing that observation. So please remind them that they must read that task brief thoroughly. They have got that 5 minutes to read. It's allocated for that, so that they know what is expected of them in that task. You know, so it's really important, some of these key things, because that's where the learners, if they don't read the task brief, or if they're not aware of the grading criteria, kind of miss out on certain elements. Although we've got opportunities, you know, to ask them questions, but I think there are certain elements that can be done better if they're demonstrating it themselves. So it's really important that they do that. Next slide, please, Andy. So the other elements are, like I said, it can be done remotely or face-to-face. And this is literally just hot off the press, because we had some feedback. So we wanted to share with you that as dispensing of medication takes place, the learner has to check with the pharmacist that, is this all correct, before they dispense it. So we don't know which pharmacist, unless they are in the camera, for example, if they're doing remote, we don't know who they're talking to. So it's really important, before they begin the observation, pharmacist introduces themselves and then comes on the camera again when they're checking that prescription for that learner to tell them that yes, it's correct or not correct, you know. So it's just certain things that you can kind of tell your learners that these are important elements of this observation that needs to happen. And also in the planning meeting, if we can start bringing in those pharmacists as well, so that they can actually then be aware of what they need to do on the day. So these are some of the important guidance that needs to be given to pharmacists. They can't just be behind the camera and shouting, yes, that's all fine. We need to know who they're talking to. The learner, yes, the next point I was going to make was the learner must use the mobile camera so they can show every aspect of the activity. If it's a laptop, you can't see when they're counting the tablets, for example, because you can only see their face. So it's really important that they use a mobile camera, or for example, I'm just going to turn my camera, they just do this to show where they're counting the tablets on their desk, or any activity. We need to be able to see all the activity that's happening. The IEA, if they're doing remotely, they need to be able to see what's happening on that desk. And because they're doing it against a prescription, there would be patient's name, date of birth, address, and everything. We do not want to know that. So they need to make sure that that's covered when they're showing a prescription. So GDPR, or for that same reason, when they're talking to pharmacists, they can't just turn their phone and talk to the pharmacist, because they might be dealing with another customer, and that customer is not given consent to be on the camera when it's being recorded. So certain elements of GDPR are really important. So this is why the pharmacist needs to come to the camera, and pharmacists need to talk to the learner when they're doing all of this. So we will be updating our FAQ document on these new things that I've just pointed out on this slide, so that that FAQ document, you can share it with the customers or with the employers, so that they're aware of, again, about their responsibilities and what needs to happen on that day as well. So professional discussion, again, like we said, it can be taken on the same day as the simulated observation. Professional discussion is 30 minutes in total. We need a quiet area. So if it's happening on face-to-face on or even remotely, learner needs to find a quiet area to this to happen, even if it's in the pharmacy. And the apprentice will be asked to show the IEA around, sorry, that was for the observation, not for, and also sorry, for the professional discussion, that they're on their own. So unless there is a 360 camera, if it's they're doing on the phone, to make sure that there's nobody else in the room. And it's funny, somebody recently pointed out, I'm going to have to tell you this, is that making sure that there's nobody under the table either. So, which was funny. But learners must be involved also in preparing their portfolio, like I said, at the level 3 pharmacy technician one, simply because they need to know what evidence number maps to what KSB, so they can underpin their responses for professional discussion based on that evidence. For example, if there is a question about, I'm just going to make this one up, is about what did they do? How did they contribute to any improvement? Or for example, and they're giving an example of a case study or something that happened in a pharmacy, and they'd actually written an evidence about something, a reflective account, or there was an expert witness testimony, then they can relate to that. Oh, that expert witness testimony on that evidence number shows this is what happened, and this is what I did, and this is how I contributed to the improvement in the pharmacy. So it's really important. I know I'm preaching the converted, but I just really need to point this out. Getting the learners to be involved in mapping their portfolio is really key. Learners are allowed to take brief notes, but there's limitations of those notes. It's only 2 sheets of A4, handwritten or typeset, Arial font size 14, but these are not pre-prepared answers against the grading criteria. These should just be prompts, what learners, so this, again, against the grading criteria, if you are preparing your own questions to ask them against the KSBs, then they can write their evidence number as well in the handwritten notes, to say, yeah, that's there and then. But if they've got the evidence portfolio mapping grid in front of them, then they would know anyway as part of their portfolio. So that, I think, keep that separate, use the 2 sides of A4 for whatever else they need to prepare as prompts. Okay. So what happens in the pre-assessment planning meeting? So when you book for the professional discussion and observation, the IEA, once they've accepted, we allocate the IEA and they've accepted the EPA booking, an email will be sent to arrange the planning meeting to the apprentice and the employer, and copied in the training provider. So pre-assessment planning meeting will take place at least 3 days before the EPA date. And it is important, it's an IFID requirement, it's not up to us. And so otherwise, if it's not happening, it'll be cancelled and it'll have to be rebooked. It's completed either via phone or Zoom or Teams or whatever. It's just literally 15 minutes to make sure that you're aware of what needs to happen on that day. Employers aware, the things that we talked about, like the responsibility that pharmacists they need to play. And it's a vital component of any EPA process. We cannot stress enough that, because employers are involved, we know, on the learning journey of the learners, but for the EPA bit, what's the key information they need to know, what resources they need to prepare, and also some of the tips that we can give to the learners as well. It's a really reassuring thing for learners as well, so they know, although there are really clear guidance and checklists in our EPA resource packs, but just that last having a conversation, and they get to meet the IEA who's going to be conducting that with them face to face. So it's not just on the day that they're meeting that IEA. And if the employer is not available during the planning meeting, then IEA will email all the information to the employer that they would have gone through with the provider and the learner. But we would really ideally like the employer to be present on the day. And the apprentices should be advised, if they've not received an email requesting planning meeting 7 days before the agreed EPA, they must contact us as well, and contact their training provider, who can then contact us as well. So Michelle is our lead IQA for both of these standards. And if, well, obviously this only applies to Pharmacy Service Assistant. If that hasn't happened, you must contact her. And apprentices, yeah, should check their junk and spam emails. That's a good point. We need to make sure that sometimes it does happen. We all know that. So important aspect to look into. The other aspects of just some good practice that we wanted to share with you was things like making sure that the apprentice and employer contact details are accurate and up to date in ACE 360. And again, we cannot stress enough for some of these things. And like I said about the level 3, the dates as well is really important. And again, preparing your learners to make sure they're familiar with the grading criteria for observation, as well as professional discussion, all the indicative evidence, and clearly so that they can show what when they're being observed, but any criteria that's not demonstrated or due to lack of opportunities, like it didn't happen on that day, you couldn't cover it, we can cover it by Q&A session post observation. But ideally, yes, every opportunity should be created, and it's a simulated observation, so it's a case scenario. Making sure that apprentices have had the opportunity to practice being observed and completing a professional discussion. So we can only again say that how important mock observations and mock professional discussions are. So as a provider, as an employer, it's really important that you carry those out either throughout the program. It's because when you're doing observations, you might as well consider those, and also important to do 1 or 2 at the end in that 23rd, 24th month, so that learner's fully prepared. And making sure the apprentices are involved. Again, we cannot stress enough in the mapping of their portfolio that they have recently revisited both their portfolios and mapping grid. So they might have done it in the 22nd month and then put it to one side, and then their EPAs have, this is PSA, so it's 12 months. So it's not just they're not detached from it, not left too long. Encourage your apprentices to develop that the permitted professional discussion notes, like I said. So all the prompts that they could think of that they might include in their answers is really important. It can be done against the sections, certain areas, each KSB if they want to do it against. However, whatever works for them, each learner is going to be different. And then ensure that the apprentices are, fully aware of the requirements of all the planning meeting and all the colleagues within that workplace. That's again also important. Know that the assessment is taking place and don't suddenly come in to interrupt the apprentice, unless obviously it's an emergency, because especially like in the professional discussion, somebody suddenly knocks on the door or enters the door, so it's just, I know I would lose my train of thoughts, and especially under exam conditions when a professional discussion's happening, these things are really important. So informing everybody, or even putting a little note outside the door to say examination in process, like we always do, so that everybody is aware of. So those were the things that we wanted to go through for the Pharmacy Service Assistant. Let's look at the questions. Okay. is the observation simulated or using real prescriptions? In our guidance, Claire, we say that it's still using the real prescription, simply because, and we went back and forth with these things, because if we were using just the simulated prescriptions, the learner can't record because there is no simulated recording systems. So using a real prescription in a simulated scenario, but recording all can then happen on a real recording system. And that's the reason we went with that. Michelle, yeah, you've answered that question anyway, sorry. So, okay, so when will routine face-to-face EPA visits return following COVID?
Do you want me to answer that one, Raman?
Yeah, please do.
So with EPA visits currently, we are seeing a higher demand for remote assessments. If there is an exceptional reason, so for example, I don't know, there's no internet at the employer site, or the apprentice has a reasonable adjustment, please get in touch with us and we will make every effort for a face-to-face assessment. There's no clear timeline on when we will return to face-to-face, because we know that every employer is different. We know that every NHS trust is different. We know that pharmacists are allowing people in. So the best thing to do is just to get in touch with us, even through the booking and scheduling tool in the additional notes. You can, in the additional information section, just give some detail and then we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Andy. So Claire, you've asked about portfolio. Yes, they can have the portfolio and the mapping grid in front of them. That's why I said, just don't use the 2 sheets of the A4 for the mapping grid. Just use it for something else. So that portfolio, yes, they can definitely have it alongside that, because they need to have access to that. Okay. One more, if we're using, it's a good point, Tina. If it's a real prescription, why is this simulated? Are we expecting learners to keep a lookout for a specific type of prescriptions? All that guidance is there in our EPA resource pack, and you will be told at the planning meeting as well. It's a good point, like I explained. Yes, simulated observation was part of the assessment plan, not our doing. But if we were to go down the simulated prescription route, we were specifically asked by, when we were developing this, by provider employers especially, to say, how are the learners going to record these simulated prescriptions? How would you, because there's knowledge, skills and behaviors about recording and reporting and finishing off that prescription dispensation. So that's why we went with real prescriptions, so that their learners can do that recording, as I explained. So that type of prescriptions, how many you need to keep, what you need to keep, is all in the guidance, and it's shared with you. It's in the EPA resource pack anyway, but what you need to do, but I think you'll be told also at the planning meeting what type.
Yeah. That as well, sorry, it's Michelle. So yeah, at the planning meeting, we'll go through with the apprentice and the employer, as Raman just said, about the prescriptions, so the range of prescriptions and exactly what we're looking for. The thing with it being simulated as well is that you can use prescriptions that have already been dispensed, that's fine, and that will make it simulated. But also there was a concern that if you've got somebody who works in the NHS, because NHS prescriptions are not a standard form, we couldn't really develop a simulated prescription that everybody would be familiar with. So you'd be in a situation where it was an assessment and you'd have an apprentice being presented with a form that was unfamiliar to them, which would unfairly disadvantage them. So again, that's another reason really why we need to be using the prescriptions that you've got yourselves in the workplace.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, hopefully that's answered your question, Tina. So yeah, okay. I can't see any other questions. Has anybody got any other questions before I hand over to Andy to go through the next bit? No. Okay, over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Raman. So in my section, I'm just going to be talking around ACE 360, some of the process, just to reinforce what Raman was mentioning earlier on today. I'm going to be talking a little bit around registration, gateways, booking EPAs, and then also where you can find additional support. And then towards the end of the session, we'll be looking at some of the success rates for pharmacy and within the wider sort of health suite of EPAs that we have. So as we're all aware, and as Raman touched on earlier, the latest dispensation for Pharmacy Service Assistant has just popped up on IPA's website. Prior to that additional 15 minutes being added, there is no other dispensations allowed. If you're working on other standards, you'll be aware that in December of last year, IPA made the decision to extend some standards, withdraw some flexibilities. IPA looked at each standard individually to make the decision. There was no one size fits all. But one thing to bear in mind is IPA have 7 overarching principles or flexibilities which they'll still allow. 3 of these are listed here. So observations taking place in simulated environments are allowed to be remote. Remote delivery of assessment, including invigilation. So for the multiple choice test element, we do have remote proctoring, which could be used. If you are interested in exploring proctoring, please speak to your business development manager or your college development manager, because there is a process that you need to go through to make sure that the Edexcel online setup is correct before you make the booking. And also gateway sign-offs. These are allowed to be done remotely. IFA allowed this flexibility back when COVID first started, so we don't always need physical wet signatures, as it were. Digital signatures are allowed, and on the gateway forms, you can use a digital signature or even email chain confirmation from the employer and the apprentice to confirm that all the gateway requirements have been met. And also, just as another reminder, the attempt level 2 rule that has been removed. So apprentices are required now to achieve the level of functional skills as directed by the assessment. I just wanted to draw your attention around some of the ESFA funding rules. I know we're in April now, but just to reinforce what Raman was saying earlier on around ensuring that the data in AS360 is accurate. It is a ESFA requirement that you inform your endpoint assessment organisation, so you're informing Pearson of the number of apprentices that you are expecting to reach gateway at least 6 months before the planned end date of the apprenticeship. And the reason for that is, to assist us with forecasting, to make sure that we've got enough independent endpoint assessors available at a time when apprentices need assessment. If apprentices' expected end dates change, you are allowed to go back into AS360 and then amend the end date. If you have a look in AS360 in the knowledge base, there is a knowledge base article which will show you with screenshots how to do that. Again, it's just to make sure that the data is accurate, because we do get audited from ESFA, Ofqual, IFATE, but similarly with ESFA rules, I have heard that when ESFA audits have happened with providers, they are starting to ask questions around, okay, when did you inform your EPA up? And the easiest way to address that is by saying, these learners were registered on S360 on this date. 6 months later, as a minimum, that is when we're expecting them to go through gateway. And also, for providers out there who are engaging with employers, just a reminder, I know this will be happening anyway, employers must select and negotiate the price with the EPA or at least 6 months before the apprentice reaches gateway. So all that will be part of your role as a provider under the ESFA funding rules. And then an additional clarification, as I mentioned on the previous slide, was that the functional skills qualifications temporary flexibilities have now ended. So there is an expectation that apprentices are attending functional skills sessions, they're being assessed for their functional skills tests enabled to enable them to achieve. So AS360 is the EPA Management Information System, and this system records everything from apprentice registration right the way through to assessment, quality assurance, grades being posted, and also certification. So the way the system works is it's like an onion. You as the provider will be responsible for uploading all of the evidence into AS360 for gateway purposes. Once gateway evidence has been uploaded, the Pearson Independent Endpoint Assessor will be allocated to the apprentice record. Gateway evidence will be reviewed and either accepted or rejected. And then once gateway has been accepted, the apprentice will move into the approved for EPA status. At that point, that is when you can use the booking and scheduling tool to confirm an appropriate date and time for the assessment. And as Rama mentioned earlier, in the additional notes section, if you know the apprentice isn't available on a Wednesday or a Friday because it's their day off, please put that in there so then it can assist us with our planning and allocation of assessors. Because it's one system, all of the assessment and results will be posted against the apprentice record. So in the apprentice record, you won't be able to access the assessment section, which is underneath. That will be locked for you as the provider, but also unlocked for Pearson to upload the assessment evidence. In the shared area, that is where you will find the learner's notification of results, and it will also populate the grade. And when the certificate has been claimed, you'll also be able to see the certification reference number. If apprentices are moving jobs and they've got different employer addresses, again, please make sure that the details are accurate, because AS360 will request the certificate from the ESFA based on the data that is in the apprentice record. One of ACE's new features is also a sort of countdown clock to how many days are left until ACE requests the apprentice's certificate. The reason there is a countdown clock is we have to allow enough time for enquiries and appeals to make sure that when we're requesting a certificate, the grade is accurate and it's been agreed. Just thinking about gateway principles. So on every apprentice record, you will see the apprentice progress bar. So you will be able to see at a glance, where is my apprentice up to? Once they're in training, the apprentice bar will just remain at in training. The moment you start uploading gateway evidence, so say for example, the apprentice has achieved functional skills and you start uploading the functional skills certificates into the component box, you will start seeing movement on the apprentice progress bar. Only when all the gateway components have been filled with evidence will the apprentice move to evidence complete. When you do a final confirmation that the apprentice is ready, they've achieved all their KSBs, the gateway evidence is all accurate and uploaded, the apprentice will move to gateway approved. What will happen then is the apprentice record will then become locked to you as a provider and then unlocked to Pearson, so then we can access the evidence. Before the gateway approved status, we cannot click into any of the gateway components. All we can see is that something has been uploaded, but the system will not allow us to check it, confirm it. Once gateway has been confirmed by a Pearson Independent Endpoint Assessor, the apprentice will then move into the EPA ready status. And then that is the point where you'll use the booking tool to request an EPA at the preferred date and time. Once EPA is commenced and evidence has been uploaded into the apprentice record, You will then see EPA progress, so there'll be movement towards that status. And then once all components have been assessed, graded, quality assured, and notification of results provided, the apprentice will move into an EPA passed and grade determined status. So you can see that in the apprentice's record, or when you log into S360 on the dashboard, it will give you the number of learners at each individual stage. So in terms of service level agreements, these are taken directly from your contract of services. Once you have submitted all the gateway evidence and confirmed that the gateway, that the apprentice is ready to be approved for gateway, within 72 hours, we will have reviewed the gateway evidence and either accepted or rejected. If there is a rejection, against the component box, you will see a note section, and it could just be you've uploaded the incorrect certificate, or you have missed a signature on a gateway form. Whatever the issue is, it will be listed in the notes section. In terms of assessment, in line with your contract, our assessment times are within 6 to 8 weeks. However, in many cases, they are a lot quicker than that. And then in terms of feedback, 5 working days after the last EPA component has been assessed. So as Raman mentioned previously, once an apprentice has sat their multiple choice test, typically we're seeing the simulated observation and professional discussion being done on one day. Within 5 working days after the simulated observation and professional discussion being completed, the notification of results will be available for you to review and a grade being awarded. Within the system, there are a couple of reporting features which will be really beneficial for you, your senior managers, to assist with tracking, monitoring, standardisation purposes. The first one is a workload report. So this will bring together all the apprentices that you have registered in S360, and it will indicate how many are at gateway evidence complete, how many are at gateway approved, how many are EPA ready, how many are in the actual EPA period, and how many have been assessed. So because the system is dynamic, the moment a person independent endpoint assessor or lead IQA applies a grade, your dashboard will update immediately. So it's not an update every 24 hours, it is instantly. As soon as somebody's done something in the system, you will be able to see it. And another one is the grade distributions function. So if you're responsible for self-assessment reports, quality improvement plans, you'll be able to highlight how many of my apprentices have achieved a distinction, how many have achieved a pass or a fail, and what's my overall pass rate. But what you can do is you can drill a little bit deeper. So if you're doing a standardisation session and you have multiple assessors working with pharmacy apprentices, you'd be able to identify which of your assessors are working with apprentices who achieve distinctions, and then you can unpick why, what is that assessor doing differently, and share best practice with the rest of the team. So just in terms of expectations around EPA, as Raman mentioned, the planning meeting. The purpose of a planning meeting is to confirm logistics for the EPA assessment. It's to confirm, is everything okay using Zoom as a platform to undertake your observation, or would you prefer Teams? The assessor will be discussing expectations for what the apprentice needs to do on the day. So it's an informal chat aimed at preparing the apprentice and also starting that communication going, because in endpoint assessment, the independent endpoint assessor won't have had any involvement or dealings with the apprentice up until that point. In addition, if apprentices have got questions or any sort of like last minute changes, that'll be the time where the apprentice can say, actually, can we start 15 minutes later than that? The assessors will have a script that they need to go through in terms of what does controlled assessment requirements mean, what happens if my internet goes down. So all of that will be discussed and agreed during that session. On the day of assessment, whether it's remote or face-to-face, the independent endpoint assessor will undertake a pre-assessment briefing with the apprentice. And again, that is just sharing the expectations of what is going to happen. So they'll confirm the amount of time that will be required for assessments. They will be explaining that as an independent endpoint assessor, they're unable to give any feedback there and then. They will explain how results will be provided to them. And they will also go through GDPR and also a data protection statement. They'll undertake the assessment components for the time specified, and they will ensure that the apprentice has a break after each assessment component. As I mentioned, no feedback will be provided on the day, and the reason for that is independent endpoint assessors need to come away, reflect, write up their assessment records, and the grade has to go through internal quality assurance before it's released. So that's why we say 5 working days from the last assessment being completed to the results being shared. If you as a provider or the apprentice or the employer do require some further support or some clarification, it won't be the independent endpoint assessor who will be doing that, because they have to remain impartial, and in effect they are the examiner. Any enquiries need to come through our group mailbox, epadelivery@pearson.com, and then we can liaise with the assessor, the internal quality assurer, or the lead internal quality assurer to get the answers you need. We do have a range of support which is available. So we've got the Steps to Success webpage. So that is where we have some videos which are split into different categories. There's also a booking and scheduling video, and there will be new videos being uploaded throughout the next couple of months. So a copy of this recording will be on the Pharmacy Standard webpage, but there will also be links to the Steps to Success webpage where a wider support offer is available. AS360 Knowledge Base, we've got frequently asked questions documents. And as Raman said, with the changes that have happened this morning, with the feedback around the registered pharmacists introducing themselves, that will be updated in the FAQ document very shortly. We've also got the lead IQA for the standard. We've got all the different Pearson teams. So if you are a college, you will have your CDM, your college development manager. Or if you are a provider, you'll have your business development manager. We have work-based learning newsletters, past sector webinars, and we've also got the customer services portal. So that is where you can make a request and it will get directed to the relevant team. Just on the on-programme side of qualifications, we do have sector-specific guidance. Again, when you get the copies of these slides, if you click into these hyperlinks, it will take you directly to the web page. Just in terms of new EPAs that are coming in 2022, so there are a range of different EPAs that are either currently live or will shortly be live. I know this isn't predominantly like pharmacy related, but it's just as an awareness. We're having sports coaches live, early years practitioner is in development, teaching assistant is in development, express delivery operative is in development, outdoor learning specialist, learning and skills teacher, information communication technician, data analyst, and community health and wellbeing worker. With any EPA standard, if you are interested in becoming an independent endpoint assessor, all of our, well, the majority of our standards have open vacancies. So if you're interested in becoming an independent endpoint assessor, if you just drop an email to epadelivery@pearson.com, we'll then signpost you to the Pearson webpage. And then lastly, just some EPA success rates. So if we just focus on the Pharmacy Service Assistant, this is currently sitting at a 93% success. The Pharmacy Technician, 100% success. Because of the move to integrated, we won't expect anything less than 100% to go through. Mammographer, 100%. The healthcare standards, 99%, and healthcare assistant practitioner, 100%. Childcare, 100% for the level 2 practitioner, and for the level 3 educator, it's 98%. Level 4 children and young families people's practitioner, 91%, and then we've got the adult care success rates there. So I'll just pause there for any questions.
Thanks, Andy. I've answered most of the questions in the chat anyway, but I think there are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of point out. But before I go there, somebody's just asked, Sam's just asked, do we know the differentiation of the distinction and pass rates for level 2 PSA?
I do. I don't have them on the slides, but we can get them.
Okay, that's fine. Well, if you, yeah. Okay, so I think a couple of questions that I'm sure everybody has read the chat anyway, but just the things that I wanted to point out was about, we know that 24 months NHS contract has been absolutely a kind of minefield for everybody. We totally appreciate it, and this is why, although the rules are that within the 24th month only you can apply for the gateway, but we can only recommend, as I've said to Marianne, just get everything done in your 23rd month, and as soon as that 24th month begin, upload the gateway evidence. Our SLA is 5 days. We're doing our best. Unless the gateway is rejected for any reason, we think all of that EPA can be easily tied up in that 24th month, and that shouldn't be an issue at all. So you should be able to access and everything done and dusted in that 24th month. But just to point out, we will not be able to claim that apprentice certificate unless that 24th month, full 24 months have completed, because of the rules of the learner being on program for 24 months as a minimum, and the GPHC requirement as well. So that's the one thing that I really wanted to point out. And then I think Tina, you've just asked about the resource pack. The resource pack is available through ACE 360. So we can't add the link to the resource pack in here because it's in ACE 360. So if you've got learners registered under the knowledge base, if you go to the specific standard pharmacy level 2 or level 3, you'll be able to see the full resource packs. Claire, how can I ask how to collect evidence for NHS learners that do not have access to person-centered care, in particular providing healthcare advice? That's a good question. Michelle, I'm going to hand over to you for this one. This is a patient-facing role, and non-patient-facing role is constantly there.
Thanks, Raman. Claire, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself. It might be a little bit easier. So can you just explain a little bit more about the example?
Right. So the learners I'm thinking of, they don't have any experience of outpatient pharmacy as like TrustMed or like a independent pharmacy that they can go and do a placement in. So everything is done through inpatient prescriptions. Now they do have a little bit of access to person-centered care with over the phone and with queries, but really things like providing healthcare advice, they really struggle to get the evidence for. And I just wondered what you would suggest in that instance.
So if they're giving over the phone advice,
yes.
What type of advice would they be giving?
So it might be a patient and it's not healthcare advice. It might be a patient that rings up asking for advice on maybe taking their medicines but maybe they've been prescribed something to take home with them and they're just inquiring about their medicines, that sort of thing.
Okay. When it comes to giving advice on healthcare,
yeah,
would you ever have a situation, do you know, where maybe somebody rings up to query maybe a dosage or something like that? The pharmacies that they work in, I'm thinking of the sort of health promotion side of it. Would they have posters or campaigns where they produce leaflets and they have them on stands to hand out?
Ooh, I don't know. I'd have to ask about that. I mean, it is something they could maybe do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it might be worth, Claire, if you can find out. Have you got my email address? I think you have, haven't you?
I have, yes.
Yeah, it might be better, Claire, if you find out a little bit more about the examples that they come across. If you want to email me, and then we can look at exactly what they're doing. Because
normally, with the level 3 learners for that particular hospital, they all get a stint in what we call TrustMed, which is like an independent pharmacy attached to the hospital, but they're not letting the level 2 learners go in there now. So we're finding it really difficult to get the person-centred care. I mean, they still serve people at the hatch, but it's mainly nurses and carers. It's very rarely patients.
I mean, to be honest, if they're registering level 2 apprentices and they're accepting this is the training that they're undergoing, they've got to go through those processes. So they're going to have to face a situation where they're going to have to allow them to rotate through. Otherwise, they're not going to meet the standards and they're going to fail their apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's what we've said. We're worried that they're going to, you know, they're not going to pass their EPA. So that's lovely. But thank you for that.
If you're digging into it, Claire, and contact me, then that's fine and we can look at it.
I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, can I ask a question of you as well? Are they doing qualification, or are you just doing the standard because it's not mandated qualification?
No, it's the integrated BTEC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they are doing that as well. So in our BTEC qualification, we still say the learners must rotate for both level 2 and level 3. So I think it's important when you're doing that tripartite agreement right at the beginning of the learner journey, put that in, add a sentence in your agreement, learner must rotate. And if they're signing it, they must rotate. You can amend those tripartite agreements for pharmacy. Please make sure, and this is for everybody, please use those tripartite agreements and add the things that you want to actually happen, because you know that that's in the benefit of the learner and for them to achieve the EPA at the end.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Just one thing that's just jumped into my mind now is, I know you've got apprentices that are already sort of part way through, but when you're having your review meetings with the employers, use the assessment standard or the EPA resource pack and say, okay, can we still confirm that apprentices have got access to? And then it will highlight it to them. So you've got a commitment statement, you've got your tripartite meetings, but then from a review perspective, you're just highlighting actually if the apprentice hasn't got opportunity to demonstrate these skills or behaviours, then they're not going to achieve positively at EPA.
Yeah. Just use those meetings and make sure you highlight them, because it's in the benefit of the learner. Yes, person-centered care could be achieved in so many different ways, but that healthcare advice bit is really important that they need to have that experience of. And also it's in the interest of the employer as well. If they're moving then from one area of work to the other, then the learner needs to know anyway. So sorry, that's my view on it, but it's important for not to disadvantage the learner to achieve their EPA. So if there's no other questions, the only other thing that I wanted to say was that people have asked me the question about the fees for the level 3. We did communicate that the fees has been reduced. If you haven't already seen, have a look at our fee list, because it's in line with the EPA components being removed. So, so the fees is reduced. However, you still need to pay that registration fee for that qualification element.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, just like to thank you for listening to us for the last hour and a half. We will make sure that either the link to the video is shared with you. And as I said, if there are any further questions, if you come into epadelivery@pearson.com, we'll be able to assist. And I've made notes of the 2 actions, and we'll come back to you separately on them.
Yeah, I think because some of you didn't, obviously we didn't have a registration, we had to change the platform for this bit. I've downloaded the delegate list, but obviously we won't necessarily have your email address. So the only thing I can request is, I don't know, Chris and Andy, how we're going to share the presentation. They'll get the recording. Can they email the EPA delivery team to get the presentation? So yeah, if you could email the EPA delivery team email address, please, so we can share the presentation with you, that would be great. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Have a good rest of the day.
You can stop the